Good day, everyone. Welcome to our learning session in Purposive Communication. So we will be talking about the communication process, principles, and ethics. But first, let us try to define what is communication. When we talk about communication, it is understood as the process of meaning making through a channel or a medium. So therefore, it is called a process, then it follows specific steps or path in order for us to communicate. And additionally, communication comes from the Latin word communicares. Communicares means to share or to make ideas in common. Therefore, if our ideas are only in our minds and without expressing it, without telling it to other people, then there's no communication at all. It's because in the communication process class, we need to consider the following components. First, we have the source. The source is the sender of the message. Again, the source is where the message is coming from. Okay? So, it is an author or a speaker in a specific event. So, that is the source. Let's say, for example, in our case right now. So, I am the source and you are the audience. So, I am the sender of the message. I am trying to send you our lesson for today. Another one is the message. This is the meaning that the source or the speaker wants to tell us. Okay? When we talk about the message, what is the speaker trying to tell us? What is the message? So that's what we call your message. It is shared between the sender and the receiver. But before we proceed to the receiver, let's know first the channel. When we talk about the channel naman, this is something, okay, this is the means by which a message is conveyed. Okay, for example, in our situation right now, so what is the channel? We are using YouTube for you to understand our lesson for today. Okay, since we are not having our synchronous class, then we have YouTube. You have your computers, you have your phones when you are watching this video. So that is an example of a channel. Any material or any means by which a message is being sent or being received by the receiver, then that's what we call the channel. Okay? Now, we have now the source, we have the message, and we have the channel. So the message will now reach our receiver. Okay, for our receiver class, this is the person who receives the transmitted message. So, like for example, you are listening in my lecture right now, you are watching this video, so you are now the receiver. Okay? You are receiving the transmitted message that I am trying to send you. Okay. Now, a receiver can be part of an audience, in a speaking engagement, or a reader of a book. So those are examples of receivers. Now, after receiving the message, the receiver will now have the feedback. When we talk about the feedback, that is the response, essentially to confirm recipient understanding. So when we talk about understanding, therefore, if there is a feedback, that means that your listeners are trying to understand what you are saying. Okay? So that is a feedback. A feedback can be written, it can be spoken, or acted out. So it can be written, spoken, or acted out. So if you learn something, or if an audience learns something, and he or she is able to apply it in real life, so therefore, that is also a feedback. Okay? Another example of a feedback is when a student is confused with what the teacher is telling because maybe there's something that is not clear with the statement. So if the student is in doubt or confused, that is also an example of a feedback. Okay? Take note that a feedback is not only a positive thing. So a feedback can also be negative. Okay? Now, another thing that we need to know is the environment. When we talk about your environment, of course, this refers to the place, the feeling, the mood, the mindset, and the condition of both sender and receiver. Of course, so for example, when you are communicating or talking to someone that who is feeling pain or who is sorrowful at the moment, then you need to consider that one. Okay? You need to suit with the situation. So that is your environment. You have to consider that. For example, you are in the United States. Are you going to talk in Ilocano there? Of course not, because the people will not understand you unless they are from the Philippines and they are now living in America. So you should consider the environment in the communication process. Another one that you have to remember is the context. When we talk about the context, you are considering the audience. Who are my audience? Okay, what is the background of these? What are the backgrounds of these people? So you have to consider the context for you to adjust yourself in the communication process. Okay? You have to consider it so that you will not offend anybody. Okay? So that what you are saying is suitable with that specific event. Number 8 is your interference. Now, interference is very destructive. Okay? When you are having a communication with someone and there's an interference, then that is something that distracts or divert your attention or focus in the communication process. Because when we talk about an interference, that is the barrier or block that prevents effective communication. Okay? Now, we have different kinds of interference class. First is your psychological barrier. When we talk about your psychological barrier, that is something with the mind and the behavior of a person. Okay? These are thoughts that hamper the message. For example, you are watching this video right now. You are trying to learn, but you are thinking of something. Okay? You are out of focus because you are thinking of something different and not related to the discussion. So that is a psychological barrier. If you are in pain, if you cannot focus because you are sad, you are broken-hearted, then that is a psychological barrier. Another kind of interference is your physical barrier. When we talk about the physical barrier, that is something that hinders you physically. So we have your competing stimulus, the weather and climate, health, and ignorance of the medium. When we talk about the competing stimulus, for example, when you are talking to someone and then somebody interrupts your discussion or your conversation. Another is the weather and climate. So if we are having now a conversation and a heavy rain came up, then you can no longer understand each other anymore. Okay? That is also a physical barrier. Another is the health. So if you feel something achy in your stomach, when your head is aching, when you are sick, then that is a physical barrier also. And of course, if you do not know how to use the medium in communicating, then that is still a physical barrier. So for example, someone is calling you in a telephone and you do not know how to use the telephone. So that is a physical barrier. Another is your linguistic and cultural barriers. When we talk about your linguistic and cultural barriers, simply this talks about the differences in practices, the differences in language that hinders communication. And lastly, we have your mechanical barriers class. When we talk about your mechanical barriers, this talks about the gadgets, the devices that you are using in the communication process. If the internet connection is weak, if your phone is out of power, if your phone is hanging or lagging, or any gadget that you have, that you are using in communicating with others, then that is your mechanical barrier. And those are the 4 types of interference. Okay? I hope that you are following so far, and we are done with the components of the communication process. Let us now proceed to the 9 principles of effective communication according to Michael Osborne. First, we have here your clarity. When we talk about clarity, we should make our message or speech understandable not only by some groups but of course by everybody. Okay? Make sure that the words that you are using are understandable by everyone. You should avoid using jargons, cliche expressions, euphemisms, and double-speak language so that your audience will not be confused of what you are talking about. So that is clarity. Number 2 is your concreteness. When we talk about the concreteness of the message, of course, it will reduce misunderstanding because when we talk about concreteness, you are supporting your ideas with facts. Okay? With facts such as statistics, research data, or figures. So therefore, in sending a message, make sure that that is factual. You have done some research about it before sending that kind of message. Number 3 is courtesy. This is an important part of the communication process. So courtesy means you are showing respect to everyone involved in the communication process. So you should consider your time in speaking, in listening when someone's talking. You are using polite words in conversing with other people. So that is being courteous. Okay? That is courtesy. You have to respect your audience or your speaker at the same time. Number 4 is correctness. When we talk about correctness, this is the use of correct grammar. Okay? The use of correct grammar, and of course, you should not misuse language. You use the appropriate words, the correct spelling, the correct grammar. We need to observe that one when we are communicating. It's because there's a tendency that it will be a reason for misunderstanding. Number 5 is consideration. So when you are talking or when you are sending a message, you need to consider the background of your audience. Who will be my audience? What are their race? What is their language? What level are they? Are they professionals? So if I am going to say this, is it not offensive to them? So that is consideration. You have to consider the things that you are talking based on your audience also. Okay? Number 6 is your creativity. Now, when we talk about creativity here, this is making a word more pleasant or not offending to other people. Okay. For example, how will you say that your friend has a bad breath? How will you say it to him? Okay? So, in communication process, you have to be creative. Anong ulam mo kanina? Okay. So, by using that question, it's not offensive, but it's giving him or her a hint na there's something wrong with the breath. Number 7 is conciseness. When we talk about the conciseness class, we need to be simple and direct when we relay our message or when we are trying to say something. For example, when you're writing an essay, when you are writing a story or something like that, so you have to be direct with what you're trying to tell. Do not include unnecessary information, okay? You should only include the relevant ideas, the relevant information needed in order to send your message well. Number 8 is cultural sensitivity. So this is about being sensitive and recognizing the different beliefs, the different practices of the people involved in the communication process. So you have to be cultural sensitive. Okay? You have to accept their practices. You have to consider or you have to make sure to keep in mind that you are different from each other. Number 9 is captivating. So in the communication process, you have to make your message attractive also. Okay? You have to make sure that it is attractive for us to be able to catch the interest of your audience, to catch more attention and better responses. So you have to make it clear, you have to make it concrete, you should be courteous, You should show correctness, consideration, creativity, concise, cultural sensitivity, and it should be captivating when you are trying to communicate your ideas with other people. And lastly, we have your ethical considerations in communication. So when we talk about the ethical considerations, this is something that we need to practice, okay? We need to practice every time we communicate with other people or we try to send a message. First, you have to respect your audience. That's why in the 9 principles, we have your cultural sensitivity, we have your consideration, your courtesy, because you are respecting your audience. Number 2, you have to consider the result of communication. So before saying something, or yes, before giving your idea, you have to consider this one. Is this related? Is this relevant? What will happen if I say this? Am I going to offend someone with these words? Okay, so you have to consider the result. Naintindihan ba talaga niya yung sinasabi ko? That is considering the result of communication. Number 3, you have to value the truth. Okay? Always state the fact only. Number 4, you use information correctly. So when's the right thing to use this information? When is the right thing not to use this information? Number 5, this is the most important one. Do not falsify information. So as you can see, in our present day, there are a lot of fake news spreading in social media, even in real life, in the real world, diba? So it is important that in the world of communication, we need not to falsify information. We do not need to change it. We do not need to add something about it, okay? Because it might lead to misunderstanding. So it is very important that we practice or we observe the ethical considerations. We need to have our ethics in communicating with other people, in sending our message to other people. So I hope that you are listening and you really understood our lesson for this video. And of course, prepare or be ready for a quiz. Have a great day, everyone. Until next time, goodbye.